Shalom, friends, and good morning to all of you, and welcome to this episode on the Watchdog on the Synagogue News. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are living in biblical times. For anybody who is here at the moment, I would just like to go ahead and do some channel housekeeping for you as we wait for some others to potentially join. So if you are here with us, please do like and share this video. Get this out to all of the different social media platforms which you frequent. Of course, what good is a message without an audience to hear it? Please consider subscribing to this channel if you like this content, if you think that we are actually delivering some good, worthwhile, conservative content, something unique, anything along those lines. Please do consider subscribing here. We absolutely do appreciate any sort of support that you give. And for those of you who are unaware, of course, the subscriptions don't exactly work the way that they're supposed to, so please consider hitting that bell to get notified every time that we go live. We go live typically Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I did not actually have an opportunity to go live yesterday, so I am shoving one in before I get to work today so that we have 3 episodes in the week for you guys. But usually they are going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then, of course, we post random debates and stuff like that whenever we have them here as well. So if you guys are interested in that, absolutely feel free to subscribe. Definitely happy to have you here. And we are, of course, very pleased with anybody who is on the same side that we are, right? And, of course, if you're not, hopefully we'll be able to convince you otherwise. But with that being said, want to also say briefly as some more channel housekeeping, there is a lot of different places that you can actually follow the synagogue. I would personally recommend that we that you guys follow on Rumble and BitChute, which are backup alternative video streaming platforms that will allow us to have a backup if and when we get taken off of YouTube, which is already started, by the way. I know you might think, what are you talking about? This channel only has 37 subscribers. Yeah, exactly. And it is actually that quickly that they've been managing to get on our case. I've already had videos taken down, strikes threatened. Basically, they don't want you saying anything about COVID. And I'm fairly certain they actually have the algorithm finding the words rather than a human person, because I doubt any person at YouTube is paying attention to this program. But at any rate, please consider subscribing on BitChute and Rumble. You'll be able to find me there as the Synagogue. But also, if you guys do frequent social media of any kind, I am on the big ones, Facebook and Twitter, so certainly do give me a like and follow there. But if you want to help us fight the tech overlords, you gotta use alternative social media websites. So please get on Gab, get on Parler, get on Minds. Obviously, if you don't use social media, you don't use social media. You're not obviously contributing one way or the other, so it doesn't really matter. But if you are somebody who uses social media, you actually are actively contributing to the power of the overlords by using their product and not the alternative product. And by the way, I know I'm speaking colloquially when I say the overlords, but we all know who I'm talking about, right? The tech giants: Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, etc. If you want to see these guys weakened, then you gotta use their competitors. And that doesn't even mean exclusively their competitors, although some people obviously will, and that's a good thing because it reduces the amount of flow to these big tech overlords. Obviously, it's difficult for us to do that because of the fact that they have so much control, hence the reason why I'm on YouTube now. But at bare minimum, we can use the competition and try to make sure that that becomes a problem that is a problem no more. So get on Gab, get on BitChute, Rumble, Minds, Parler, choose one, get an account. It's free, and you're actually doing something quite substantial when it comes to fighting the big tech overlords. I know it doesn't seem like something as small as getting and using a product could actually help, but that's literally how our system works, right? That's the whole point about capitalism. And just because you pay for it doesn't make it any, or just because you don't pay for it, rather, doesn't make it any less capitalist in that regard, right? But that being said, that's about all the channel housekeeping that we have. Want to briefly remind you guys that if anybody is interested in helping with transitions, intros, outros, things of that nature, potentially even, quote, commercials, obviously just advertisements, please do hit me up. You can definitely hit me up on any of the different social media platforms that I just mentioned. But we are looking to get intros, outros, things of that nature, transitions of some kind, right, set up to make this show a little bit more official, nice, all that other kind of stuff. And with that, we are going to go ahead and get right into our pre-article discussion, which is related to the conversation that we were, in fact, just having about alternative social media platforms. By the way, real quick, shalom to Richard. I appreciate you being here today. So recently, Rand Paul, as in the sitting senator from Kentucky, had a video of his pulled from off of YouTube. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the reason for the pulling of this video was his questioning of COVID science, questioning the efficacy of masks, questioning whether or not it was actually worthwhile to vaccinate children, things of that nature, right? Things that a lot of people have questioned. But obviously Rand Paul is doing so from the perspective, number one, of a sitting senator, and number two, of a medical doctor. To be fair, he is a doctor of the eyes, but he is a medical doctor. So both of those are important things to note. He had this video taken down. It was an interview with somebody else, and I'm not sure who the somebody else was, so I do apologize for that. But he had this video taken down because of the fact that, like I said, he was not buying the COVID narrative hook, line, and sinker. He was actually questioning the almighty coronarchy that we, of course, are forced to bow to these days, it seems like. And because of that, even though he's not allowed to, for example, ban somebody from commenting on his own personal Twitter. That's against the law, apparently. But it's not against the law for YouTube to say, all right, we're going to completely remove you entirely on this platform, or bare minimum, remove a couple of your videos on this platform. And of course, some of you may be saying, well, this isn't really the first time this has happened. Didn't they blacklist the former president of the United States? And yeah, they totally did. Let's not forget that the tech overlords are so strong that they were literally capable of censoring the president of the United States for the last over 2 weeks of his presidency. Completely. He was removed from YouTube. He was removed from Facebook. He was removed from Twitter. He was removed from all of the different social media platforms that are considered mainstream. Google started shadow banning content that is related to him, started obviously, and even blatantly, and admittedly so, pushing up what they consider to be authoritative sources. So pushing down things like Fox or OANN or Newsweek or things like that, and pushing up CNN, MSNBC, all these other, quote, liberal ones. And I say, quote, liberal just because the conservative news is often not on your team either. But I digress. The point is, of course, that they were capable of doing that. And I'm not even a fan of President Donald Trump, as many of you guys know. But obviously, I'm even less of a fan of censoring the sitting president of the United States of America, or any American for that matter, but much less the sitting president of the United States of America. I'd very much like to know what he has to say. One of my favorite things about Trump, in fact, was that he tweeted out a bunch of the stuff that he thought. It was easy for me to keep up, right? I didn't have to go dig into a whole bunch of government documents and news articles like one would have to with Barack Obama, like we're currently having to do with Joe Biden, right? It was kind of convenient for somebody like myself who wants to be informed. You just go on Twitter. Trump's going to say whatever it is that he feels, right? Now you're informed as to what the president is thinking. Twitter decided, Facebook decided, YouTube decided, hey, we don't really like that, actually. We think that that's a no-go. So we're going to, ex-nay this man off of the platform. Not a fan. Not a fan. And now we are seeing that, of course, because why wouldn't it, expand to other members of the government. In this particular case, it's Rand Paul. He had the audacity to question the coronarchy, to question the efficacy of the mandates that have been mandated by the coronarchy. What does he get? He gets censored. That's the way it is. That's the America we live in. That is why You, my friends, need to get on Gab, Parler, Minds, BitChute, Rumble, all these different platforms. Vote with your dollar. If you're on Twitter, I know it's not literally with your dollar because you're not paying for it, but if you're on Twitter, then just get a Parler or a Gab. It's like the same platform, basically, right? If you're on YouTube, get a BitChute or a Rumble. Just do it. You're on Facebook, get a MeWe or a Telegram. Just do it, right? It's not that difficult. And the alternative is companies that are so powerful that they can not only censor a sitting senator from Kentucky, not only alter the way you're allowed to perceive elections because certain people aren't actually allowed to have their campaign stuff online, which of course is something well documented, started in 2018, really started in 2016. But they even have the power to censor the most quote unquote powerful man in the planet. And by the way, I think the Trump presidency kind of proved that that's not actually true. U.S. president isn't the most powerful man on the planet. As it turns out, it's a bunch of shady tech geeks hanging out in Silicon Valley. Most powerful men on the planet and women. So get alternative platform. Get on alternative platforms, please. I beg of you, for the sake of our nation, for the sake of truth, for the sake of being able to speak what is right. Get these accounts. And by the way, if you're going to get these accounts, go ahead and follow your boy at the synagogue. Shameless plug. Anyways, let's get out of our pre-article discussion into some of the articles today. We got a lot to talk about. Obviously, you guys can see some of what we're going to talk about by the title. Unfortunately, I did not actually get these things into the description, but we will have them into the description at some point today. So I apologize for being useless. Let's go ahead and get right into the first thing I want to talk about, which is Australia. Aussie tyrants do not want Aussies speaking. That, by the way, my friends, is 100% literal. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not using hyperbole. I'm not straw manning. That is actually what the health secretary in Australia has recently said, that Australian people, when they go out and about, need to avoid entirely, again, not making this up, talking to each other. That's a no-go. You can't speak. Speaking causes COVID. This is the place where we're at now. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you about that, right? We're here. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you the actual video where she said this, but we are going to read an article talking about some other stuff that is related to this as well, because as it turns out, not only has she been able to say publicly that she doesn't even want people having the audacity to talk to each other, lest they die of COVID, I guess. But on top of that, she apparently has a whole bunch of other plans that the Australian government will not make public. The only thing they will make public is the fact that they will not make this public, which is weird, in my opinion. And by the way, doesn't really do a good job to dissuade conspiracy theorists like myself, just for the record, if you guys are trying to think of a way to do that. But nonetheless, just one moment while I go ahead and get my article sharing here, or screen sharing here for the article, rather. Oop, that's not what I wanted. Well, it is what I want, just not quite yet. We'll watch you later. Just a second, friends. Okay. Looks like we're good. All right. New South Wales Health Minister. So I guess to be fair, to correct the record. Now, I don't live in Australia, so that's part of the reason the record is wrong. But to correct the record, she's not the Australian Health Minister. She is the Health Minister, specifically, excuse me, of New South Wales, which is one of their, I don't know if they call them provinces or territories, states, but you get the idea. Like the same thing that California, Idaho, Montana is here in the States, right? This is written by Rani Heyman. I'm pretty sure I pronounced his or her first name incorrectly. So I apologize for that, Rani or however you say that. I'm sorry. I'm not even Heyman. I apologize. New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard refuses to make Kerry Chant's COVID-19 advice public. Wait a minute, hang on. So I'm getting mixed up here. See, this is what happens when we go straight live with stories that we just recently read, but that we still feel are important enough to talk about. Brad Hazzard is the New South Wales Health Minister. Kerry Chant actually might be the Health Minister for all of Australia. And again, I do apologize for that, friends. I'm not from Australia. I don't know a lot about Australian politics. I have friends from Australia, but for the most part, they are busy people because I only know them because of apologetics. So do note that the story itself is my interest. I can get the periphery details wrong, and so look those up for yourself, absolutely. But the story itself is my interest because it obviously shows the coronarchy globally. The periphery details about like the exact positions people have and stuff like that are things that I may mix up simply because I'm not Australian and I'm not super familiar with Australian politics. So just note that kind of stuff. And by the way, always note that kind of stuff because here's the thing. If you guys trust me, and I appreciate that you do, that shouldn't be good enough for you, right? Do your own research. Make sure that you're fact-checking me because for all you know, I could be a dirty, stinking liar who really wants to take all your money and just is doing this all as a scheme, right? You don't actually have any way of knowing that. I'm not, but all you know is that I said I'm not. You know what I'm saying? You don't know me personally. So check your information. When I put the sources in the description, read them and read other sources about those things if you're interested, right? But just make sure you're being vigilant about the information you get, even when it comes to people you trust like myself. Anyways, New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard has refused to publicly release documents detailing the COVID-19 advice Chief Health Officer Dr. Kerry Chant provided about locking down Greater Sydney. Sydney, of course, is the largest city in Australia. I believe it's one of the largest cities in the world. Long list, not short list, but I do believe it is one of the longest cities one of the largest cities in the world. But obviously a pretty big deal, right? It's easily the most famous city in Australia too, right? Which of course those things are not always the same, right? You could argue that New York might be America's most famous city, but Los Angeles is clearly the biggest. Los Angeles could be the most famous city itself. I guess I'm not really sure. And we do have other cities like San Francisco and stuff, but you get the idea, right? They're not necessarily the same things. Well, in Australia, they definitely are. So this is a pretty big deal. During a parliamentary inquiry on Tuesday, fiery Mr. Hazzard butted heads with committee members as he and Dr. Chant were questioned over the management of the state's growing COVID-19 outbreak. Now, when they say growing, you do need to understand that it is literally growing, right? In the sense that it is like there are more people who appear to be sick today than there were yesterday. That is true. It is still very small. I was following one of the people who is from Australia who I do know in the sense that we speak in the internet fashion, right? I follow him on Twitter a lot, and he had posted about how I believe it's like 12 deaths in New South Wales in total from COVID. Since this new surge started, which is like, well, they were talking about the Delta variant like 2 months ago, right? So it's been quite some time. The fact of the matter is it's not very many people. And you're actually seeing the same thing happening in Texas. They're talking all this stuff about how Texas is completely overwhelmed and how Texas is just not going to be able to handle this. Look at the case numbers and the death numbers right now for Texas. Compare them to COVID peak in April when Texas was fine, by the way, and every other state was fine, and everybody overreacted, right? Texas has neither as many cases, nor as many hospitalizations, nor as many deaths as they did in April, May. But I guess apparently they're way more swamped now than they've ever been. Something doesn't line up there. And by the way, that's information you can just get off of Google. Just type in, hey, what, COVID deaths and COVID rates in Texas. They give you a nice little convenient chart that allows you to actually go back and check the cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. And there has been days. Now, of course, I question some of the numbers, but if you just take the numbers at face value, which we're going to do for this episode, there have been days in Texas where more people had died from COVID than have so far died from COVID in the month of August. There had been days in like California and New York where more people had died from COVID than have so far died in Texas in the month of August and July and June combined. I think people often forget that Cuomo and also Michigan Governor, what's her name? It's fleeting me right now. Is it Whitmer? I feel like it's Whitmer, Gretchen Whitmer. I might be wrong about that. Anyways, it'll come to me like in the middle of the show when I'm talking about Texas or something like that, right? But anyways, they like forced the death rate up actually by forcing old folks to remain inside their old folks' homes when they were sick, thus spreading this virus to the most vulnerable of the population. Of course, Cuomo's now stepping down, and it has absolutely nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that he apparently likes to touch women, which is entirely unshocking. But obviously, he should probably be tried and executed, and I'm being 100% serious, for the fact that he basically murdered tens of thousands of old people in New York. But New York still, to this day, has more people who have died on Cuomo's watch, right, than any other state. Texas, California, Florida, Illinois, doesn't matter, right? But Texas is apparently this big deal. Same exact thing happening in Australia, right? Where you have everybody freaking out about this growing, quote, problem, right, in New South Wales. And in reality, the problem is not what they say it is. Is there literally, in the sense of like dictionary definitions, more COVID cases today than there was yesterday? Yeah, that's true. Is New South Wales being like hamstrung by COVID? No, there's no evidence at all to suggest that. These people aren't even bold enough to actually claim that. But if you actually talk to people in New South Wales, they're like, dude, everything's fine. We're good. But anyways, the committee made up of opposition and Greens MPs, which is members of parliament, asked Dr. Chant to provide the precise date she gave Mr. Hazard advice about locking down Greater Sydney. Dr. Chant said the formal advice to lock down the region was provided in writing to the New South Wales Crisis Cabinet on June the 25th. The same day, stay-at-home orders were announced. But when asked to publicly provide the documents, the health minister strongly shut down the request because transparency isn't going to work for the people, who are running these coronarchies. See, the whole point is to keep you locked down, basically. Pun totally intended. Quote, I'll answer that because obviously those issues go to Crisis Cabinet, which is a subcommittee of Cabinet, but Dr. Chan is under oath and she's given you the evidence, which is quite clear, so she won't be providing any documents, end quote. See, she's given you the evidence, so she can't provide the evidence. I don't know, make it work. On June 25th, Premier Gladys, I'm totally going to say this wrong, Brejiklian, Barrick, whatever. We're going to call her Gladys. Premier Gladys announced a 2-week lockdown of Greater Sydney, the Blue Mountains, the Central Coast, and Wollongong. Dr. Chant conceded a party at West Hoxton in Western Sydney, described by the Premier as a super spreader event, was the catalyst for the decision. Oh, super spreader events. But whatever. This is like I said, this is the world we live in. We all knew that this was the world that we were going to live in. We said it. Nobody listened. here we are now, and everybody still thinks that you're crazy for believing in conspiracy theories, even though every single one of them, with the exception of the QAnon nonsense, has been proven to be true in the last year, but whatever. The party was attended by a man linked to the Bondi cluster. 27 of the attendees became infected and passed on to their contacts. The cluster now stands at 45. Quote, it was unknown at the time that there wasn't containment of the West Hoxton Park party. There is concern that there was leakage at that point that was not recognized at that time, end quote, Dr. Chance said. Now, that gets you the general idea. There's a whole bunch of stuff that could be gone into, but I'm going to provide, obviously, later on links in the description so that you guys can check that out for yourself. But for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and close off the article here because you get the general gist of it, right? They are locking down New South Wales as of June 25th, which, of course, is over a month ago at this point, about a month and a half ago. They are giving their reasons, but they're not giving any documentation or evidence to back up those reasons and seem to be being very secretive about what it is that they're doing. And this is the kicker here, my friends. Check this out.
We all need to work together. We need to limit our movements. We need to consider whenever we leave our house that anyone with us, anyone we come into contact with could convey the virus. So whilst it is in human nature to engage in conversation with others, to be friendly, unfortunately, this is not the time to do that. So even if you run into your next door neighbour in the shopping centre, in the Coles, whilst you're at Coles or Woolworths or Aldi or any other grocery shop, don't start up a conversation. Now is the time for minimising your interactions with others. Even if you've got a mask, do not think that affords total protection. We want to be absolutely sure that as we go about our daily lives, we do not come into contact with anyone else that would pose a risk.
Hey, man, I didn't say it. She said it. So YouTube, please don't take this down, okay? All I'm doing is showing you a video of what the Australian health minister actually said. Or I guess New South Wales chief health officer is what she is. Like I said, I might get some of those details wrong. That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing, okay? Hands up, don't shoot. You know what I'm saying? To be a little pokey at you. I didn't say it. She said it. She's the one who said that you're literally not even going to be able to talk to people, or at least you shouldn't be able to. She didn't actually say that there was going to be any measures towards that. But who knows at this point, right? We didn't think there was going to be any measures towards forced vaccinations or forced mask mandates. But here we are in the year 2021 in the month of August. You know what I'm saying? But at any rate, we have other stuff to talk about. This is the last thing we're going to talk about before we get to the headliner. And then after that, if we have time, we're going to get into infrastructure and Julian Assange. But Oregon governor, reading our racist, paraphrased, of course. Now, obviously, I did a little bit of a joke there being completely grammatically incorrect. To obviously poke fun at the fact that the Oregon governor has recently suspended high school qualifications for math, reading, and writing. But then again, that's also the point of the joke, right? Is sooner or later, reading our racist could be something that people actually say, and they're being 100% serious if they're coming from Oregon. Why? Because apparently the government in Oregon doesn't actually think it's worthwhile for your kids to read, write, or do math. Because that would be racist. That would disadvantage colored kids. Because you see, Democrats, they think so lowly of people who are, or think so low, rather, not lowly. They think so, no, I said it right the first time. Never mind. They do think so. They think so lowly of the people who are not white, basically, if we're just going to be blunt with it. Democrats think so lowly of non-white people that they actually think that teaching math, reading, and writing puts them at some kind of a disadvantage. and that it's harder for them to get through school because apparently their little black Native American and Mexican brains can't actually handle the English language and our big words. Now, to be clear, I don't believe that. So if anybody wants to try and, oh, dude, CJ's being racist. No, y'all's being racist. All right? Y'all's the one who's saying that somehow, in some inconceivable way, reading and doing math disadvantages colored people. By the way, once again, I didn't say it. They said it. Don't believe me? Let's go ahead and check it out. Oregon governor, this is for some reason not where it's supposed to be. Oregon governor signs bill suspending math and reading requirements for high school graduates. You do not need to be proficient in math or reading, and by the way, writing as well, which the article will reveal here in a moment, in order to graduate high school in the state of Oregon. Because this moron right here, friggin' real life Valma, right? She thinks that it's racist. It disadvantages non-white students. And by the way, you're racist for not having a heart for them. How dare you? Oregon governor signs bill suspending math reading requirements for high school grads. Now, this article is actually on the New York Post, but it's from Fox News. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that because I know I will get it wrong, but it's Edmund, last name there. And let's go ahead and get right into this, shall we? Governor Kate Brown, the Oregon Democrat, signed a bill last month with little fanfare that drops the requirement that high school students prove proficiency in reading, writing, or math before graduation, a report said. The Oregonian reported that the governor has seemed to avoid discussing Senate Bill 744. Her move to sign the bill was, quote, not public until recently because her office did not hold a signing ceremony or issue private release, end quote. Which is quite interesting how all of these woke government officials can't just let people know what they're doing. If you're so freaking holy, maybe you can let us all know what you're doing instead of being so damn ashamed. The fact that you're ashamed, perhaps, lets us know that you ain't exactly as good as you think you are. And maybe you know it. But let's continue. The paper also pointed out that the bill was first signed on July 14th, but not added into the state's database until July 29th due to a glitch in the system. Quote, end quote. I don't know. I mean, I've worked for many companies that utilize a lot of technology, and I've also had to use technology in order to do my apologetics on YouTube. And yeah, you didn't have a glitch in the system that took 15 days to fix. Sorry. But anyways, Brown's office did not immediately respond to an after-hours email from Fox News. In June, state lawmakers voted to approve this bill that suspended the requirements for students for 3 years, KATU reported. Foundations for a Better Oregon said in a statement at the time that the bill is intended to, quote, truly reflect what every student needs to thrive in the 21st century. So apparently doing math and reading are not things that are important in the 21st century. I don't know what kind of 21st century these Democrats intend to have. Maybe it's one where we go back into the Stone Age and start clubbing each other over the head with Brontosaurus bones. I don't know. I mean, I kind of like the Flintstones. It's a cool show. So, maybe we can turn it into future future society. Think like a Neanderthal, right? It is funny that these people have the audacity to actually refer to us as Neanderthalic or cavemen or troglodytes or whatever, right? But anyways, supporters of the bill insist that considering math and reading essential skills has been an unfair challenge for students who do not test well. Let me say right now that is 100% incorrect. First off, I myself have always been a very good reader. I am no longer a good reader because unfortunately, well, to make a long story short, I just after high school started to suck tremendously. So that's how that works. But not really a good reader much anymore. But I wasn't ever somebody who was particularly great test taker. One of the biggest reasons was because I was incredibly apathetic and I didn't tend to focus. Now that even varied. Sometimes I actually ended up being incredibly good at test taking. So it was sort of a back and forth sort of thing. But the point was that the 1 and 2 didn't seem to equal 3 in that particular instance, the same way that they're putting it out here. Another example that doesn't seem to indicate that at all. I have family who's incredibly good at math, amazing at math. They can't take a test worth a damn. They just simply cannot test. They've never been able to, right? Not their driving test, not high school tests, right? Not their tests in middle school, not their SATs, nothing, right? They just can't do it. Not good testers, but they're real good at math. So, I mean, not only do these two things not go hand in hand with each other, but also, that would just be stupid anyways, right? Let's just disregard. Let's say they did go hand in hand. That's ridiculous. So because you're not very good at something, because you're having a problem with something, we're going to just not do it. Like imagine you were on a football team, for example, and you're a wide receiver, and we're just saying, all right, well, he's not very fast. So what we're going to do is we're just going to stop running instead of potentially A, working around the fact that this particular receiver is not very fast, or B, maybe trying to get him to his peak potential so he can work his body to be as fast as it can possibly get. No, we're just going to give up on running. Just kind of stand there, maybe walk. I don't know. If we get the ball, yeah, we get it to you. But if you don't, you participated, you get a trophy. It wouldn't make any sense, obviously. What if we had a firefighter who was maybe having an issue, not necessarily with lifting, but for those of you who don't know, there's actually a particular kind of lifting that's very easy to do, which is lifting something over your head, or very difficult to do, lifting something over your head. You can have very strong muscular people who could carry something that is, hundreds of pounds in the way that you might see like on TV where you carry a body, usually rescuing somebody, right, or something like that, but you get the idea. And they might struggle tremendously with having something over the back or having something above their head because they're utilizing different muscles when they do that. So imagine you have a firefighter who's having troubles with one of those different versions of carrying because maybe he has particularly weak muscles in one of these different areas of the body that needs to be utilized. So they just say, okay, well, maybe we'll just stop lifting stuff. I mean, who cares if there's somebody who happens to be in a bunch of rubble and they're, screaming in agony, burning to death, suffocating, and you're supposed to be the person who can save them, but, I mean, you can't do it. No harm, no foul. We're good. Don't feel bad about yourself, buddy. Obviously, that's stupid. Stupid. Same thing applies here. Obviously, not the same, what would you call that? Stakes, right? But same general application. If you're bad at something, then you need to A, find ways to work around your flaws, and B, try to improve your flaws to the best of their ability so that they don't end up being as big of a handicap as they could be. Look, some people suck at math. That's just the way it is. They're never going to be good at math. I'll speak for myself as an athlete. I'm not, right? Is basically the point. I'm not an athlete. I will never be an athlete. I never could have been a serious athlete. At best, I might have been able to do like the Peyton Manning thing where it's like you're the least athletic guy on the field, but like the sport really well, so you can kind of make it work, right? But even then, Peyton Manning has got a whole bunch of athletic advantages over me, right? And obviously dedicated his entire life, right? We'd have to fast forward or rewind back to being like a 4 or 5 year old kid, but you get the idea, right? I'm not 6'5". I'm not 230 pounds out of shape. I'm not fast running 22 miles per hour, right? I was never going to be these things, and I could try as hard as I possibly could, but I was never going to be those things. However, that doesn't mean I can't work out and be healthy and make those handicaps as small as they can possibly be to the point of where they're effectively not handicaps, right? Like just because I'm not an athlete doesn't mean I can't be healthy in the sense that I work out, or cut in the sense that like you have defined muscles or something like that, right? I don't, by the way, but you guys get the idea. I'm trying to weave an analogy for you, right? So if you're never going to be good at math, fine, you're never going to be good at math. But we can at least improve you to a point to where math is not a handicap for you, right? And we can also find ways to work around that so that, for example, you don't have to get a job where you have to do complicated math. Maybe get a job where you're doing, some level of hard labor, or a job in cooking, or a job doing athletics, or whatever, right? There's the whole litany of things. The report said the requirement was first suspended at the start of the pandemic. And of course, that was initially done because people thought it was unfair because students were being kicked out of schools, not literally, but in the sense that you're not allowed to go because COVID and all that kind of stuff. So we're doing it online. And this whole thing is just a big heaping pile of, hey, get out of the public school system, homeschool your kids, or at least bring them into a private school, which is the point I'm trying to get at. Oh, here's a fun fact, actually. Sorry, I missed this. The KATU report pointed out that Republicans have come out against the bill and claimed that it lowers expectation for our kids, but there was some bipartisan support. You know that thing that Nicholas always says about how the Democrats are getting off the plane and the Republicans are just carrying their luggage, meaning that they lag, slightly behind? I think you're seeing a good example of that here, right? There are some Republicans, if it's racist. Now you might say, they haven't said anything about race, Jay. Where are you getting that from? Well, here you go. Charles Boyle, the deputy communications director from Brown's office, told the paper in an email that staff from the governor's office informed legislative staffers about the bill signing on the day it was passed. He also said that the new standards for graduation will benefit the state's, quote, Black, Latino, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian, Pacific Islander, tribal, and students of color, end quote. Because I guess reading are racist, like I said. The paper reported that the bill could stay in effect for 5 years until new requirements probably are mandated, is what they meant to say, but it just ends saying new requirements. The paper's editorial staff urged Brown to veto the bill back in June. Quote, Oregon schools are among the last in the country to reopen to in-person instruction during the pandemic. Our legislators should be focused on how to help students regain the ground they've lost after a year and a half of distant learning and hybrid instruction, not on lowering standards, end quote. But of course, I guess it's a little bit too late for that, because this pinnacle of human genius right here, this absolute mastermind of political philosophy, brilliant. We should build statues to her because she has deduced that reading are racist. Slow clap, friends. Slow clap. Anyways, let's get to the headliner for today, shall we? Texas House is fed up with Dems, and the House Speaker has issued arrest warrants. No joke. This is real. The Texas House Speaker, Dade Phelan, has signed 52 arrest warrants for absent Democrats in bid to end Chambers' weeks-long stalemate. Not kidding. So we are getting to a very interesting time in American history, are we not? What is going to happen next? I have no idea, but we'll see what indeed does happen. It is now 2 days since this has occurred, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody has actually been arrested, but this is still a pretty big move. The Texas Supreme Court earlier Tuesday ruled that Democrats who refused to show up could be detained by law enforcement and brought back to the state capitol. And now the Texas House Speaker has issued arrest warrants for all 52 of them. Let's get right into this. First, let's give credit where credit is due. This is from the Texas Tribune. Writers of this article are Cassandra Pollock and Patrick Svitek. Pretty sure I said that right, actually, which would be a rarity for me when it comes to literally any names that aren't English. I'm terrible with this stuff. But nonetheless, giving credit where credit is due, and let's go ahead and jump into this. Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan on Tuesday evening signed civil arrest warrants for 52 House Democrats still missing from the state capitol as he aimed to regain the quorum needed for the chamber to begin moving legislation during the second special session. The move was confirmed by Falan spokesperson Enrique Marquez, who said the warrants, quote, will be delivered to the House Sergeant at Arms tomorrow morning for service, end quote. The warrants were first reported by the Dallas Morning News. Democrats who may be arrested would not face criminal charges or fines and could only be brought back to the House chamber. Dozens of minority parties fled to Washington, D.C. during the first special session to block a GOP voting restrictions bill, which is what they're, of course, calling it. But what it really is just a way to make sure that only bona fide American citizens are voting, just to be clear. The 52 warrants represent all but 15 Democrats in the lower chamber. All but 15 Democrats. That is huge. There were at least 11 present Tuesday. There were no additional Democrats on the floor Tuesday after 4 returned a day earlier and drew the wrath of some Democratic colleagues still in Washington and prompted a renewed push inside the party to hold the line. Earlier Tuesday, the House voted overwhelmingly to authorize law enforcement to track down lawmakers absent from the chamber. The 80-12 vote came hours after the Texas Supreme Court ordered that those missing Democrats could soon be detained by state authorities. The order by the all-GOP court came at the request of Governor Greg Abbott and Falan, both of whom had asked the court Monday to overturn a ruling from a state district judge that blocked those leaders from ordering the arrest of the quorum-breaking Democrats. In a statement after the warrants were signed Tuesday evening, State Representative Chris Turner of Grand Prairie, who chairs the House Democratic Caucus, said it is, quote, fully within our rights as legislators to break quorum to protect our constituents, end quote, and reiterated Democrats' commitment to, quote, fighting with everything we have against Republicans' attacks on our freedom to vote, end quote. Now, we need to pause here to say that this is purely Democratic rhetoric. Okay, first and foremost, there is no right whatsoever for you to literally leave your place of business and protest. You might think, it might be odd for us to think of government in this way, but what is essentially happening right now, it's kind of like a strike. A whole bunch of employees have decided we're just going to leave, right? And we're not going to do our jobs. And you don't have a right to do that. Frankly, you should have, I think, as the House Speaker, the right to just fire people in that regard. Like, if you're not going to do your job, you don't have it, kind of thing. Now, obviously, there's some things that would need to be accounted for in regards to the democratic process there. So perhaps I'm speaking a little bit too boldly. But the fact of the matter is that is what this is it's a whole bunch of people who have been employed to do a job now not doing that job. You don't have a right to not do your job. Okay? Nor is there any constitutional right in the United States Constitution nor the Texas Constitution for a legislator in particular to just walk out and protest, right? On top of that, Republicans in Texas are not attacking anybody's right to vote. They want voter ID laws, and they want to audit the vote of 2020, right? I don't think that that's too much to ask for. Considering the fact that you need an ID for literally everything else, and all these same Democrats want you to now have an ID for your medicine, right? Oh, this is your medical history, the medicines you take, whether or not you're vaccinated, probably all your other vaccinations as well, right? They're cool with that kind of an ID. Voter ID, that's racist. That hampers our right to vote. Explain it to me. Make it work. Anyways, since the legislature gavelled in Saturday, for its second special session ordered by Abbott, the House has been unable to make a quorum as dozens of Democrats have remained absent from the chamber. When the House was unable to meet its 100-member threshold to conduct business Monday, members adopted a procedural move known as the Call of the House in an effort to secure a quorum. That move locks doors to the chamber and prevents members on the floor from leaving unless they have permission in writing from the Speaker. That vote earlier Tuesday marks the second time in recent weeks that the chamber vote has voted to send law enforcement after Democrats still missing from the House. During the first special session in July, and after more than 50 Democrats flew to D.C., members present authorized state authorities to track down their colleagues, but the move carried little weight since Texas law enforcement, lacks jurisdiction outside the state. Which is why, frankly, and I'm not even kidding, I think that the Texas legislature should find a way to just make these 52 members null and void. Like, if you're not going to do your job, you're out. You're done. Okay? We're done with you. We're going to have a special election session, right? We're calling for a vote of no confidence, which you can do, by the way. You can call for votes of no confidence in this country. We don't do it, but it's possible. And you say, well, that you have the majority. Why would you call for a vote of no confidence? To get more of the majority. You think that the Texas people are cool with this kind of thing? I guarantee you have a special elective session in 2021 or 2022. At least a dozen of these Democrats have serious trouble keeping their seat. Guaranteed. And by the way, you only need 8. Actually, you only need 5 because there's now 15 Democrats who have returned as well as 80 Republicans. Now, how would you go about doing that? I don't necessarily know. I don't even know if such a thing is possible. But as far as like actually having that massive of a vote of no confidence special elective session, right? But there's got to be something like that you can do because, frankly, this kind of stuff is ridiculous. And by the way, let me also say that when people, Ted Cruz shut down the government, Ted Cruz filibuster, Donald Trump shut down the government. I'm sorry, what did you guys do in Texas again? Just went on a vacation and stopped doing your job. At least he was in the process of doing his damn job. But whatever. By the time that first 30-day stretch ended last week, Phelan had signed only one civil arrest warrant for Representative Philip Cortez, a San Antonio Democrat. But that move came too late since Cortez, who had briefly returned to Austin, had already gone back to the nation's capital. Inter-party pressure has been mounting on House Democrats since the second special session started, after at least 4 of them returned to the floor Monday, bringing the chamber within 5 members of a quorum. Some of their Democratic colleagues who were still in Washington unleashed on them. Representative Anna Marie Ramos of Richardson tweeted at the returning Democrats that they all threw us under the bus today. Pressure ramped up Tuesday morning when a coalition of Democratic-aligned groups released a statement urging House Democrats to hold firm and continue breaking quorum. The 21 groups, including Planned Parenthood Texas Votes, the state's Sierra Club chapter, the Texas Organizing Project, Progress Texas, the Communication Workers of America, and several groups that advocate for Latino Texans. So in translation, we have 21 groups that include literal baby murderers, got to be grammatically correct here. I know that's racist, but, whatever. So we have bona fide baby murderers. We have globalist climate freaks. I'm not sure what the Texas Organizing Project is. We have outright socialists. We have more outright socialists. And then we have people who are very likely incredibly racist because, let's be honest, not all advocates for ethnic groups are racist, but all advocates for ethnic groups on the left are racist. But anyways, quote, to every pro-democracy Texas lawmaker, the only way to preserve our right to vote and the best way to fight is to stay off the House floor, end quote. The coalition statement said. The group also released a 4-page memo arguing that far more was at stake in the second special session than just the elections bill, citing, quote, a host of radical conservative priorities, end quote, throughout the agenda. The memo was particularly emphatic about a new proposal for the second special session, dropping the quorum threshold to a simple majority, which they totally should do. If this is the way the Democrats are going to play, then play hardball, right? As long as you're not actually violating your principles, play hardball. Calling it an, quote, ominous allusion to reducing or eliminating minority rights in the legislature, breaking centuries of Texas bipartisanship, end quote. As if they didn't just do that. Meanwhile, a number of House Democrats have returned to Texas but have not come to the House floor to help provide quorum. State Representative Celia Israel who has said she is back in Austin, said in a statement to the Tribune after Tuesday evening's news that Texas deserves so much more, which is exactly right. Texas really deserves to have you guys arrested and charged with something. I would personally like to see you removed from your offices. But I'm a radical. So, quote, I didn't sacrifice my business and my family over the last few weeks to just swing the door open for a civil warrant based on right-wing politics and pandering to 5% of the voters. Which is hilarious, by the way, that she actually thinks that only 5% of the voters are right-wing. Ma'am, you are in Texas. Don't know what freaking planet you live on, but it ain't this one, apparently. I'd like to welcome you back to reality. Here in reality, the state that you live in is called Texas, and it's super right-wing. But whatever. Anyways, there's a little bit more you guys can read here. I'm not going to read the rest of it because you guys get the idea. I don't have any respect for these people whatsoever. Sorry, I just saw LPP posted something. Did you see that the court ruled that the governor can restrict their paychecks? I have not talked about that actually quite yet. And I wasn't actually going to talk about it today, so it's probably a good thing that you came in, LPP, because that, by the way, shalom, and thank you for being here. But yeah, that is a very important thing to note on top of all this. That would have been neglectful on my part, I guess, if I didn't mention that. So I appreciate you. But yeah, the courts did actually rule that Governor Abbott has the right to restrict their paychecks for all the time that they are actually no longer in the House legislature doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is, of course, being a legislator. I know that's an absolutely shocking concept. But I don't know. I want something more. And I don't know if something more is possible. And I might even, when I'm in a little bit less of an angry headspace, not want something more. Perhaps I'm not being very principled right now. I don't know, right? Sometimes I'm young and hot-headed, right? Well, I'm always young, but sometimes I'm hot-headed. But I don't know. I feel like something has got to be done here where it's like, remove them from office at least. Restrict their powers at least. I mean, potentially charge them with something seems like it's reasonable. But at least remove them from power, right? Call some special elective session. I don't know. I might not even know what I'm talking about, right? Who knows? Everybody needs to check up stuff for themselves. There is one last thing I want to talk about, and that is infrastructure bill passed with 17 Republican votes. That's right, 17 Republican votes. So-called conservatives, GOP, well, psych, I guess. What are those names that we have? Let's go ahead and check them out. I'll zoom in here for you so that you guys can see here. Now, this is, of course, from CNN, but it's a list of the names. So, And I do think it's hilarious, by the way, that CNN, who actually has these Republicans taking their side now, just totally ousts them and gives us a nice, convenient list for, that we can go to say, hey, these are the people not to vote for in the upcoming elections. Just goes to show that the left is nothing more than a circular firing squad. However, let's go ahead and go through the list. If you live in any of these states, this is your senator. Roy Blunt of Missouri voted for the infrastructure bill. Richard Burr of North Carolina voted for the infrastructure bill. Shelley Moore Capito voted for the infrastructure bill. West Virginia. Bill Cassidy, Louisiana, voted for the infrastructure bill. Susan Collins of Maine voted for the infrastructure bill. Kevin Kramer of North Dakota voted for the infrastructure bill. Mike Crapo here in Idaho voted for the infrastructure bill. Lindsey Graham, yes, Lindsey Graham, a darling of the conservative side, voted for the infrastructure bill. Chuck Grassley of Iowa, John Hoeven of North Dakota, which means both senators from North Dakota, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Rob Portman of Ohio, Jim Risch of Idaho. That is both of the senators of my state. You can imagine how disgusted I am. Mitt Romney of Utah, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, and Todd Young of Indiana. And for those of you keeping count, that is also both of the senators from North Carolina. So these are the 17 traitors who decided to increase inflation, devalue the dollar, push us closer to a Green New Deal, push us closer to socialism, vote in favor of this $1 trillion infrastructure bill that was recently passed, I believe 2 days ago. So if you live in any of these states, please do your damnedest to get rid of these losers. I'd like to also, by the way, petition that we use a term other than rhino. Obviously, Republican in name only. It's a cool and clever acronym. However, rhinos have a lot of strength and spine behind them. These people are more akin to something like a jellyfish, or perhaps a capuchin monkey that's been crippled from the waist down. Nonetheless, perhaps we can come up with something a little more demeaning for them that actually properly describes what absolute scum they actually are. But that's just my own personal preference there. Let's go ahead and get rid of these people, shall we? I got some work to do here in Idaho for certain, because at least one of these guys, Mike Crapo, has elections coming up 2022, this new cycle. So let's go ahead and get somebody in the Republican primary to get rid of this absolute tool. And we'll go ahead and move on to Jim Risch in 2024 as well. And if you live in any of these aforementioned states, namely Indiana, North Carolina, Utah, Idaho, Ohio, Alaska, Kentucky, North Dakota, Iowa, South Carolina, Maine, Louisiana, West Virginia, or Missouri, you got some work to do. So let's go ahead and get that work done. Now, what exactly did these people vote for? Because obviously it's one thing to say that they voted for it, but what is it that they voted for in the first place? Some of you may not know, right? Potentially could be the reason you're watching. So here's what is in Biden's, $2 trillion infrastructure plan. I believe that this is actually old, though. I believe they have reduced it down to about 1 trillion. But nonetheless, here is our pudding in chief, semi-sapient in chief, Joe Biden. Anyways, after weeks of anticipation, President Biden will unveil on Wednesday a sweeping proposal to revitalize American infrastructure and manufacturing, beginning with the transition to clean energy and industry and create jobs. Here are the details. Notice you already see some of the red flags. What do you mean clean energy? That's government mandated. That kind of sounds like the whole climate agenda. I'm not saying I'm opposed to clean energy. I am saying I'm opposed to government mandated clean energy. And I'm also opposed to a lack of efficiency, which so far all of the, quote, clean energies, with the exception of nuclear, are incredibly insufficient. And inefficient, by the way, which is the original point I was trying to make. But insufficient is totally true, so I'm not going to retract it. So here are the details. The $2 trillion Biden, that is not proper English. It does do my heart good joy to know that people who have journalism degrees are not properly Englishing, because I don't properly English all the time. Anyways, the $2 trillion Biden plan, probably what you meant to write, will ask Congress to approve for his American Jobs Plan, which, man, this is just written terribly, actually. I'm going to actually read this to you guys the way it's written. The $2 trillion Biden will ask Congress to approve for his American Jobs Plan will be spent over a period of 8 years and paid for with tax hikes over a period of 15 years. This is on Forbes. I didn't notice this when I was reading this article at first, but that is like absolutely atrocious. You need to get an editor, ma'am. Anyways, the idea she's trying to communicate is the $2 trillion Biden plan will ask Congress rather to approve his American Jobs Plan, which will be spent over a period of 8 years, have the $2 trillion spent over a period of 8 years, and will be paid for with tax hikes over a period of 15 years. Included in that $2 trillion is $621 billion for transportation infrastructure like roads and bridges, with $174 billion of that set aside for the electric vehicle market. See, here I was just making fun of her, and now I'm having a problem reading her perfectly fine English. $111 billion for clean drinking water, $100 billion for expanding broadband, and $100 billion for power infrastructure like the electric grid. Yes, the government wants to get its grubby little hands on your internet and on your electric grid. Not that they aren't obviously already there, but they want to get their hands on it even more. As well as setting aside money to literally steal from you at the point of a gun. If you don't believe me, don't pay your taxes. And give to the electric vehicle market. So Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world, is about to get your hard-earned money because taxes. Isn't that fun? There's also $213 billion for affordable and sustainable housing. By the way, affordable and sustainable is not actually what affordable and sustainable means. Affordable and sustainable is a dog whistle, not to utilize leftist terminology, but it is truly the definition of a dog whistle, right? It is a dog whistle for climate agenda, right? For having things that are, quote, green. $400 billion for the care economy, and $100 billion for workforce development. To help pay for all that spending, the Biden administration is expected to propose a series of major tax changes, including raising the corporate tax from 21% to 28% and raising the global minimum tax. Biden also wants to encourage domestic manufacturing by making it more expensive for American companies to produce goods and services overseas, which is the only positive thing in this entire litany of crap. Interestingly enough, I actually was hoping Trump would do that, and he kind of did with the tariff war. But neither him or Biden is doing what I would do, which, well, let's just say I would probably never have any chance in hell of getting elected off of my economic policy alone. But let's go back to the article. While Republicans are sure to balk at the price tag and the potential repeal of many of President Trump's tax cuts for big companies and wealthy individuals to pay for the plan, some progressives are saying the package should be larger. This is not nearly enough, says Representative Alexandria Occasional Cortex, as Mark Dice commonly calls her. This is not nearly enough, she says. The important context here is that it is $2.25 trillion spread out over 10 years. For context, the COVID package was $1.9 trillion for this year alone, with some provisions lasting 2 years. Needs to be way bigger. Now, of course, this is nothing more than evidence that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does not actually understand the concept of numbers, which, again, as we saw in our previous Oregon article, things like math and learning of any kind apparently is racist. And, of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez not only being woke and progressive, but also Latina. Obviously, she can't be expected to know things like math because that would be racist of us. Anyways. Oh, man, I might have just gotten my video removed. It's fine. It's fine. I was already going to get removed anyways. Subscribe to my Rumble and BitChute account, please, if you actually are interested in this watchdog. Anyways. Democrats just don't have any concept of how math works. But this is the idea, right? So we're getting a whole bunch of money spent for, quote, green energy, green housing, electric vehicles. You notice that the whole thing is all in regards to either something green, which is why people are calling it the prototype of the Green New Deal, or some level of state involvement in company business, right? I guess you do have care for the elderly and disabled, so that's also a thing that's here, but that's also the state just expanding its power. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the rest of it. Oh man, that's funny. Richard says, it's cool, CJ. If anyone messes with you, just reply that you graduated with honors from an Oregon high school. I should actually use that. That's the thing is I'm actually a high school dropout, but it's just as good at this point, isn't it? That's funny. I appreciate you, Richard. But I'm going to end the article there. Links will be in the description below if you guys want to read this all for yourself. But I got to get to work because, unlike those on the left, us conservatives, we do this thing called being employed. Yes, even at the young ages of 23, when we have YouTube channels, we're still employed. I know, it's amazing that conservatives do, things that are just basic and involve living, but whatever. If you guys appreciated this program, please remember to like and share. Please remember to subscribe if you have not done so. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. If you think that I am worth it, if you like this content, think it's unique in some way, think that it's content that is deserving of being out there, I do aim on making not only conservative podcasting and stuff like that, but also apologetics and all that. But of course, depending on what you want to give for it, really doesn't matter. I appreciate you guys either way. If you do want to, though, just drop my link for Patreon in the description. So definitely appreciate that if you guys are down. By the way, yes, LPP. I did. I actually got my GED before I was even 18. Because my dropping out is a little bit different than a lot of other people's dropping out. I made the decision I was going to drop out of high school in the 4th grade. Because at a protest, and I maintained that protest until I was legally allowed to, which would have been 16, but I was on probation at the time, so it ended up being 17. But it was a protest against the public schooling system, which in hindsight might not have been the best way to protest the public schooling system, but that is the story there. Should look at colleges like Western Governors, very affordable and flexible. That would actually be a pretty interesting thing to look into. Anyways, I'm getting distracted with the live chat while I'm trying to get out of here. I appreciate you guys very much. I appreciate you guys for being here. Again, please remember, like, share, subscribe. Questions, comments, criticisms, concerns in the comment section below. Links to all my different social media as well as the articles will be provided in the description, though they're not there now, as well as links to my BitChute and Rumble, as well as the Patreon. If you guys would like to follow me on the backup here for video streaming or contribute to this financially and help us get a conservative revolution started. I appreciate any of that. And just want to remind you guys to be watchdogs. We'll be back for you guys tomorrow morning. And ask yourselves this in the face of Armageddon. Can't even get my own motto right. Will you compromise